recording. And we're up on YouTube.
Thank you, ma'am. We're getting ready to start the Public Safety Committee meeting. We're just waiting for 2 more folks to join in on us. Councilmember Sheila, I can't remember if I called on you last to do the invocation or Councilmember Seekins.
I don't remember either.
I will call on Councilmember Seekins since he's doesn't have his video on. Maybe that will prompt him to turn his video on. He can join us.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if you guys want to start, the mayor's going to be about 5 minutes late. So if you want to, you've got a quorum, it looks like.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. We have a quorum. So I'm going to call to order the Public Safety Committee meeting of December the 6th, 2021. I'm going to ask Councilmember Seekins if he'd be so kind to lead us either in a invocation or a moment of silence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we might bow our heads, Heavenly Father, in this time of celebration and joy, please remember those who are less fortunate, those who are struggling, and those who need the hand of others on their shoulders as they get through tough times. With that, we couldn't be more blessed to be in the most beautiful city on earth and thankful for all those who work so hard to make it that. In your name we pray, amen.
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 Amen. Well done. Thank you, sir. You should have a copy of your November 22nd, 2021 minutes. It's about 2 pages long. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The next item on our agenda is approval of the City of Charleston's Emergency Operations Plan, the EOP. Who's going to take care of that for us?
Councilmember Shade, I'm happy to spend a couple minutes on it or answer.
That'd be great. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. So in the opening pages of the EOP, the mayor has an acknowledgement and a resolution to adopt the National Incident Management System. But then you find the core of the plan, which is the basic plan. And the basic plan is a framework for coordinated management of emergencies and disasters in our city. And it notes key areas where we align with the county and the state and other jurisdictional partners. It looks at our hazards, our potential impacts, and the vulnerability and risk assessment that was done last year. It makes planning assumptions about these emergencies and disasters and how we'll respond to and recover from them. It speaks to the needs of vulnerable populations. The EOP also outlines the emergency management program's concept of operations, which is aimed at coordinating department-wide actions to meet the emergency management program's objectives. The EOP adopts the national preparedness goal on behalf of the city, where we aspire to be a secure and resilient city, capabilities required across the whole community to prevent, protect against, mitigate, respond to, and recover from the threats and hazards that pose the greatest risk. The EOP covers areas like continuity of operations, declaration of a local emergency, activation of the EOP, and various actions associated with our MEOC. It outlines departmental responsibilities for preparedness, response, and recovery, including the important role of financial management. It summarizes the roles of the mayor and city council, the director of emergency management and their staff, as well as incident command staff. And finally, following the EOP basic plan, there are annexes on flooding, on pump operations and tropical cyclones that speak to each hazard and to response and recovery. Other annexes will follow. We've recently written an earthquake annex and a hazardous materials annex is in the pipeline here, and more to follow. And that closes out my part. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any members of council have a question for Dan on this plan? Okay. Seeing none, we need to move to adopt the EOP. Do I hear a motion that we adopt the EOP?
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion, comments, questions? This is pretty comprehensive. If you haven't had a chance to review it, I would sort of recommend all of us who are involved in this to take a look at it. All right, call the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, sir. That was a lot of work to be done in a very concise and short presentation, but thank you for doing that, Dan. And we'll move on to the update on the racial bias audit. I'm going to start off with our chief. Chief Reynolds, good to see you always. And good to see you yesterday afternoon as part of the parade. So you want to lead off with this update on the audit, please, sir.
I will, thank you. And then I'll hand it off to our staff who's each, we got a handful of people that are going to kind of each take different slides and talk about this in a more comprehensive way. But I really think it's important for me because we haven't given an update to Public Safety Committee recently to talk. You'll hear a little bit about the goals and objectives in front of you, but I want to just make an important statement publicly that we embrace this audit. We have from day one, and we are addressing all the findings. It's important for me to state how comprehensive that is. It involves our hiring process, it involves our training, it involves our equipment, our policies, it involves the culture of our organization, it involves our leadership development and the partnerships that we've developed and funding sources that we've gotten to invest in the leadership of our organization. It involves things like use of force, the complaint process, accountability. It involves every aspect of our organization. We have made and we will continue to make progress on this audit. We are committed to that and we'll never stop. I've argued publicly and internally in our command discussions and with our troops, we will never accomplish just going across the finish line and saying, hey, we're great. We've achieved, a great status. We're going to always be a learning organization. When I look around, I say, you know what, as good as we're doing, we can always do better. And so we know that we have work to do. And I feel like we've made tremendous progress. You'll hear about that. We're committed to all members of our communities. And we are not committed to, quote, fixing the numbers. I'm going to read a statement to you and just address something briefly as we move forward with this presentation. But we actually have embraced all of our communities. And I just want to pull up a letter. You won't see it, but I'm going to read a letter that was sent from CAJM to our council. I think a version of this has gone to the mayor, to you, Councilmember Shade, to Councilmember Gregory and others. The one that I'm looking at is dated November 20th to Councilmember Gregory. I'm writing you on behalf of CAJM, requesting your help. As you're aware, we are very concerned about the priority of and progress on the audit for racial bias of the Charleston Police Department. And here are key facts to call to your attention. And number one on that list, I'm reading verbatim, is the objective of the audit was to reduce and eventually eliminate racial disparities by the Charleston Police Department. The measure of success will be the significant reduction of Black people being stopped, cited, or arrested in relation to their percent of the population. It's important for me to say we are committed and we will remain committed to serving all members of our community, all members. And I received a phone call last week, and I think it's important to talk about a person who's a member of one of our communities whose young son was murdered in West Ashley years ago, Monica Jefferson. And she called me to talk to me about my own health. She called me to let me know how much support she has for me, and her family are praying for me. And I said, we're never going to forget Malcolm. And when you hear me talk to my troops, to my command, to the media, to our communities, and when we talk about what we do and how we do it and why we do it and the importance of what we do, I will think of you often. And I got to tell you, I think of Monica almost daily, and other women and other parents and other mothers who have lost their children to gun violence, to gang recruitment, and not all of them necessarily through murders, but the effect of trauma is very disparate on certain communities. We are not going to stop policing those communities. We are going to passionately protect and serve all the people in our communities. And I find it frankly disheartening and disrespectful to think that we would try to, quote, fix the numbers and depolice or do less for any communities, especially those that are in the greatest need. And so we are going to passionately commit to making sure that we serve all of our communities. They don't want less police. They don't want our officers to depolice their communities. They don't want us to stand down on the violence in their communities. They want to be treated with dignity and respect. They want to make sure that we have an organization that is procedurally just police department, that is embracing the Constitution and constitutional policing principles, that are looking towards things like evidence-based policing and treating all people with dignity and respect. And I just got to tell you, it's important for us to state that it is our job to protect and serve all of our communities. And there are certain communities that are disparately being impacted by this violence. And those mothers that I described, every one of them wants justice for their child. Sit down and talk to them and listen to them. Listen to a wailing mother who's just lost her child, who is sitting there because maybe they're in the hospital. And this happens a lot. Go to MUSC and talk to Ashley Hink and others who are trying to help us address this critical problem, whose son or daughter now is paralyzed for the rest of their life. His children and their communities have got to deal with the impacts, the cascading effects of violence, because their kids have to go to school and take a test after they just had to look at our crime scene techs collecting 50 or 60 shell casings outside the window of their child's bedroom. So I'm going to stop there, but I got to tell you, we're about protecting and serving all of our communities. We're about being guardians that care deeply about solving problems, about making a difference in those communities, especially that need us the most. And I'll stop there because this audit is real. It is leading to real change, progress, reform. It is leading to better and differing outcomes from our department and how we treat people and who we interact with. But we're not trying to fix the numbers. I just need to say that, and I'll hand it off.
Appreciate those comments and what you've read. Okay.
Hey, good morning, afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Chief.
And Chief Reynolds covered a lot, but this next slide, for the record, I think is very important that we at least establish what the primary goals and objectives of the audit. So I will read them verbatim to put them on record. At the beginning of this process, CNA audit was designed to accomplish the following: assess, monitor, and assist the CPD and connect in concert with the community in uncovering any aspects of implicit bias or systemic and individual racist bias. Assess the effect of enforcement operations on historically marginalized and discriminated against populations, particularly those in the African-American community. Provide recommendations for reforms that improve community-oriented police and practices, transparency, professionalism, accountability, community inclusion, fairness, effectiveness, public trust, taking into account national best practices and community expectations. And lastly, engage the community to understand both the experiences and the expectations of interactions with CPD. You know, and I just like the chief said, we're fully committed to this process, have been since the beginning. But for the record, we want to at least establish what the primary goals of the audit was, so there's no confusion. And with that, I'm going to allow Captain Cortella and Captain Brutus to kind of highlight some of our progress. Tony.
Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Captain.
So in the audit, there's a total of 72 recommendations. There we have 24 in progress, 26 are full compliance annual review, and 21 are full compliance. So we chose to break down the audit into those three terms. So when we talk about items being in full compliance, what we're talking about is that the recommendation from the audit has been completed and there is nothing else for us to do with that. An example of that would be some policies. They reference in our use of force policy in terms of adding the word sanctity of life statement. So we added that, and that's full compliance. But we did even further than that. We said, well, there's some policies and some things that we'll do here at the Charleston Police Department, well, they just might need an annual review. So those 26 that are full compliance annual reviews, those might be some policies and procedures where, yes, we've complied with the recommendations, but we need to look at them every year. So not only is our use of force policy being looked at every year, we added the sanctity of life statement, but that's an important policy that could be determined from a court decision. It could be a national practice or a best trend, or it could be CALEA coming out saying that we need to add some type of language in there or make sure with their use of force policy that we're doing A, B, or C. So that's a full compliance annual review. Another one would be an example of our body worn camera policy. Yes, it's completed. We added the additional timestamps on it to make sure that we're within the guidelines that they suggested. But we want an annual review of our body worn camera policy just to make sure that it's in best practice and national standards. And then in progress, what that means is that we've touched that audit item. We are currently working on it. And as you see, there's 24. So these are the ones that are, I would say, are harder to reach, if you will. They take a little bit of time, investment, and capital. So we are working on the 24 of them. If you do the math, you're going to say, well, these don't add up to 72 recommendations, and you are correct. CNA actually redacted one recommendation, but that was after the audit was published. So we didn't want to put in their 71 recommendations because the public would want to know, well, where's that other recommendation at? So we are actually at compliance with our 71 recommendations. So what we did is we created this dashboard. And this dashboard is forward-facing the public. It's very interactive. And it's broken down into 5 categories within the audit. We talk about personnel practices, complaints, community policing, use of force, and traffic, which in each slices of these pie charts are going to represent each of the recommendations from the audit. If you click on the special part of the pie, it'll take you to a certain section within the audit. And that'll let you know that if we are at full compliance, annual review, or in progress. In addition to that, it talks about our next steps. There's clickable links on that. And this was one of the, I would say, tangible items that we're able to achieve in such a short time. And this was all done within the city and the help with GIS and their personnel over there. Also, Wendy Stiver helped us out with this and making this dashboard accessible. And we came in and essentially put the audit items in there and ensured that we are up to date on it. And as we progress through the audit, you're going to see that our numbers of 24 will decrease over time. What we're hoping is that this dashboard will be a tool for the public to use. These are clickable links that might take you to the end of year report, our use of force report, or to our other dashboards that we're hoping to get online soon here shortly. And it's going to take the place of a mid-year audit report. We've talked about the best ways to get the information out to the public. And we went back and forth. Well, what does an audit report look like? So we will complete an end of the year report, but otherwise a mid-year audit report is going to have a bunch of police jargon in it that isn't going to be helpful to the public. And it only comes out once a year. So that's why this dashboard will be updated as we start to move through the 24 different initiatives that we're working on to make sure that they're addressed. I'm going to turn the next slide over to Captain Bruder.
Can you, before you do that, Captain Patel, can you go back to one slide and just explain a little bit more? And you hit on it, but the distinction between full compliance, 21 of those recommendations, and full compliance annual review with 26.
Sure. So full compliance, CNA recommended that we take out the word, quote, other in one of our use of force options. So we took out that term other, and there is nothing else to do with that category there. So we took it out. That standard has been met. An example of the full compliance annual review would be our use of force policy. They wanted us to add the sanctity of life statement, which we did. We also feel it's important to review that policy every year. We could have put that into the full compliance, but we chose to actually create this category of annual review just to make sure that we're hitting on certain policies or procedures every year. So those are the ones that don't get lost.
Thank you. I just want to
Yes,
make sure the public was clear on the distinction between those two categories. So thanks for expanding on that.
Yes.
Okay, Captain Bruder.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. So you've all heard us talk about data since more or less the audit was first even discussed. A big part of the audit was data, and a big part of the findings of the audit were that our data really wasn't in a condition to be used. That were some of the things like Captain Cortella mentioned with, not having fields available or too many fields available. It was also our data connecting to one another. For instance, our traffic stops, there's several ways those can end, either in a ticket, in a warning, and in an arrest, and none of those systems talk to each other. So this year, and really since the audit, we've been working on putting systems in place to be able to use our data in a way to help us address and identify where there may be issues. I'm sure you're all looking at this screen and there's all kinds of things that might pop into your head, and I'll go into a little more detail there, but there's several things that pop into my head as well. And data really doesn't answer any questions for us. It helps us ask the next question. And that's a big part of what we're trying to use our data for, and get it in a manner, in a way that we can display it so we understand it. And then we can drill down on it further so that we can actually answer the questions and then identify the actual potential problem and address that if there is an issue. That could be a single officer, it could be, a squad or something like that, but we simply don't have the data in a situation or in a place where we can use it readily available. So what you're looking at here comes from our field contact data. I believe I came to this group earlier in the year and talked about how in January 1, 2021, we changed a policy. We couldn't get these systems to talk, so we decided as an agency that we were gonna issue a policy that field contact cards are supposed to be completed for every proactive activity done by an officer. An officer decides to stop somebody, they should do a field contact. In just about every one of these situations, it means they're having to duplicate work. They may write a ticket, they may write a warning, but they also have to do this field contact card. Even if the person goes to arrest and they already have 5 sets of paperwork to do, they do this field contact as well. We've been working on throughout the year, refining that and getting the officers in compliance with that, because there's some kinks to the system, as with all data. And in the background, while the officers are getting better, GIS and our crime intelligence unit has been working on how do we use this? How do we make it this displayable? And this is that dashboard. You've seen an example of this before. This is an updated version. And so this is just from field contact data. We can't use any of the other systems we have because they don't talk to this system yet, but this is field contact data. This is just for the month of November for just the traffic unit, which is about 7 to 10 officers that did their traffic work over the last month. So that's the context of what you're seeing here. It's traffic officers, they have a specific objective. I know generally that they're dealing with our high volume areas where we have a lot of collisions, or they're dealing with neighborhoods where they have traffic complaints. And that's what they're working with. So I can look at this as a commander and use this to kind of go, okay, generally speaking, I know that about our driving population in Charleston is about 30% Black drivers. So I can glance at this and go, okay, I was 35% this week or this month. That's a little bit higher than the average. So it would cause me to go, okay, where were they? Were these stops in a different area? Were they doing the things I wanted them to do? In the big scheme of things, that's about 200 traffic stops. It's 4 or 5 traffic stops that went one way or the other to be back in line with what would be a citywide annual average. What else does this screen tell me? It gives me obviously the race there. We can break this down by age. You also see on the bottom left there, what types of search. For the most part, and it's looking like upper 90% there, traffic officers, when they're conducting traffic enforcement, aren't in an area where they're going to be looking for guns or drugs or those types of things. That there's not really a probable cause search. They didn't have a single probable cause search last month. More than likely they had They didn't search people 90-something% of the time. But when they did search, somebody was incident to arrest. So likely they were either a DUI, they had a warrant, they didn't have a license, those types of things. So at a quick glance, and this is the whole design for the dashboards, at a quick glance, I can see that generally speaking, my traffic unit did as expected during the month of November. What we're still working on, and that's why this is just an example, it's a screenshot as we develop this, is working with GIS, who helped us with our last version of this project, is being able to see where those stops actually happened, where the stops conducted, where we told them to go. Did they go into 61 and 7, where we have a lot of collisions? Were they at 17 and Wesley, where we have a lot of collisions? If they weren't, then we need to make sure our troops are being adjusted to and understand our expectation for what they're doing out there. The future versions of this will be able to drill down to a single officer so that I can see an officer, how their stops are, how many were there, were their searches different than other people, were the demographics different? And again, what those numbers show just raise more questions for me as a commander to know what to do with all this information that before we couldn't even look at. So if we were go back this time, 2020, none of our systems talk, still none of our systems talk, but we've created a workaround. We created extra work for our officers, but we believe it's necessary so that we can start looking at things like this. Now, here we are about a year later. We've got the data, it's there. We're gonna have something to compare it to next year. We're getting better and more reliable at collecting that data. And now we're having to figure out how to get it into a system where we can actually see it as police commanders and make some decisions and make some adjustments to what we're doing. This only, obviously, the more people you add into this, the more units, the more objectives, the more tasks you add into this, the more confusing this dashboard can get. That's why I gave you a very simple, straightforward 7 to 10 officers. This shows you what they're doing. They all have a primary mission of reducing collisions and handling traffic complaints. And this is the results that they had last month. So obviously, if this was a click of a button or something like that, we would have done it a long time ago. Our CIU team has done a great job at working through the different vendors that we have, trying to find workarounds, trying to find things. We did get a solution for our tickets and warnings. It took us the better part of 2020 and 2021 to negotiate being able to actually get the work done. We've paid to get the work done, or we've got the PR cut to get the work done. It's a matter of their software engineers getting it scheduled, getting it built, testing it, and then adding that, just so we can add one field that's going to help us link these things together there. So I know it seems like a long time and a long process, but in the software world and through COVID and everything that they're dealing with, we've been staying on them, and we've actually made the officers do more work just so we can start to collect this data. Is there any questions about on the screen here?
So I just want to zero in on what you highlighted, Captain Bruder, about this bottom left-hand corner search, not search incident to arrest and not search. So as you stated earlier, a traffic stop is being made, and what may happen is a ticket is issued and that's it. That's the end of the story with that stop. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that's one of the other things that we're going to add in addition to search is ticket or warning. Were they given one citation, 3 citations, or were they given a warning? And we're still working to add all that in here, because again, those systems don't talk, but that's the objective. That's kind of the big picture when we get to this.
And then in that small minority search incident to arrest, that may have occurred because the person may have had an outstanding warrant, or they were unable to produce a driver's license, or they were driving under suspension, something along those lines. Is that accurate?
Correct. There's several. I think there's about 4 different reasons we would search, or we have a label to search cars on a stop or a person on a stop. Not search is obviously one of them. Searching to arrest another. Probable cause search is one, but it's not shown on the graph here because they didn't have any of those probable cause. So, if I were to walk up to a car and see something in plain view that would give me probable cause to search the car, that would be indicated on here as well. But the traffic unit, those 7 officers, didn't have any of those this month, so that's why it's not on the graph at all.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. All right. And is anybody else after you to follow up on this audit?
I think Captain Cortell's got one more
Okay.
slide.
Yes,
So-
sir. So the chief uses the analogy that everything is like a marathon. So I'm going to kind of deviate from that and use that everything is like a ladder in life. So the top of the ladder is the Charleston Police Department as a whole, but each rung identifies as something else. And the audit is just one part of the rung of the ladder, and that's going to get us to the top with this Charleston Police Department. So we talk about the strategic leadership plan, that we are still focusing on that. Our Leadership Development Institute, we're about 2 years in the making of that. We have partnerships with Charleston Rotary, and from that, we have been awarded $80,000 so far in grants from them. We've been working on the submarine way, so that will impact every member of the Charleston Police Department, both our professional staff and our sworn component. All the community initiatives that we've been working on, for example, Cops on a Coop, the Faith and Blue weekends, the trunk or treats around Halloween time, or even the cookout in the Gaston Green with activities and sports to recruit for our community pod year-long youth program. We have our engagement with CPAC. We have to remember that, you know, we're just strictly can't focus on the audit, that the audit is a part of all these different things to help make us successful. And then finally is, what are the community expectations and what can you expect from us? So the first one is that the audit or the audit dashboard will be updated in a timely manner. Anytime that we have a significant progress update on it, we will be pushing out something in a press release and also social media to let everyone know that we've had achieved a goal within that. And then also we'll have an annual report for the audit, and that'll be published no later than the end of the first quarter of the following year. So the annual report for 2020 will be published by the end of the first quarter of 2022 coming up. Our procedural justice position, that is open right now, but that is being reworked by the help of DC Walker and some members from CPAC. So that position will be fulfilled here shortly. And then also our third-party contributor that the audit recommended. And that's going to help us manage our data and the proper benchmarks that we're trying to achieve here within the audit itself. And that is our presentation to you. And we'll be conducting 2 presentations in 2022, just to give you another formal update of the audit itself.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that update and all of y'all's contributions to this report. So I'm going to open it up to members of the Public Safety Committee if they have any specific questions or comments right now. Councilmember Mitchell, comments?
No, not right now. No. I think everything was self-explanatory. I think people just want to see the what was going on, I guess, and seeing what the reaction of what the police department have done and what they are doing. So I believe that's what it is. I think this should be self-explanatory, in my opinion.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Councilmember Seekings, any questions or comments?
Just thank you for keeping us updated. Certainly helps us answer questions. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Councilmember Shealy.
Yeah, just want to say thank you for all the extra work and effort that you put in here, everything that you're doing. You know, it was very, very good, very clear. I don't have any further questions, but I do appreciate all the extra work everybody's doing.
All right. Mr. Mayor.
Can I just recognize Councilmember Shealy and Councilmember Appel in particular for participating full-time. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they've been every session of our Citizens Academy. I think they're probably going to be pushing their colleagues as we move forward to get everybody through the academy. And I say that because they hands-on have participated in things like, okay, why do we have use of force? What is the actual policy? What do you train on? What's the culture? What's the supervision? What do the officers do to actually be prepared to confront a difficult, violent encounter? How can they de-escalate? How do they have the duty to intervene with each other, to hold each other accountable? I could use great detail and great example, not only with the use of force, but almost anything in our profession. These are critical to being a progressive, reform-oriented, constitutionally principled policing agency. those details matter. And I just want to thank you, Councilmember Shealy and Councilmember Appel, for being there. I wish I was there with you. I haven't been able to be there for your sessions. I know you guys are graduating this week, and it's a big commitment. It's no small thing when you're running a business and you have a family and you have community commitments with so many other things, the Rotary, et cetera. But I don't know if you want to comment on that, Councilmember, but that alone yields great value.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put a value on it, Chief. You know, being able to, I mean, the police department has opened up what they do, how they do it. And I will tell you, they're professional, they're ethical. I mean, it's incredible, the organization that we have. I think we're extremely fortunate. I don't know, because I hadn't been in any other police departments, but I can't imagine there being a better group, a more organized group with better training and just in general, better people. And heck, I got to look and see what's good and bad about what we're supplying our police department. So, you know, a lot of good has come out of that, but I couldn't in any way put a value on what we've been through. So I appreciate the opportunity. And yes, council members on here, you certainly need to do this. And you guys, I know, are much more senior than I am on here, but I will assure you, you'll learn things and you'll probably come out with a higher respect than you already have for all of our police officers, but particularly our leaders, our trainers, and people in you know, in higher positions with our police department, because they do an incredible job. But I would certainly encourage every one of you to do this. So thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. Mr. Mayor, any comments or insights?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the presentation. I'm very pleased that we have the dashboard up and running. I think it adds a new level of transparency about all this, which is helpful and positive. Sometimes when you're transparent, you put data out there, you know, there are things you need to work on. You're not there yet, right? So, but that's part of the process of being transparent. And I recognize, I remember when we started all this, my disbelief at how disconnected our system was from SLEDs and the state systems, and having to work around all that in order to even get the data in usable form, as you said, Captain, to be able to really use it as a tool to continue to improve. I do think it's pretty remarkable that of the 72 recommendations, that right at 2/3 of them are in full compliance, although as you recognize, a good number of them are things, you know, you have to review every year and make sure you're on the right track. So I view that all positively. And Chief, thanks for your comments to set the tone. As we started, you know, clearly we serve all members of our community, but a focus on doing that with dignity and respect. I would like to ask, you know, at some point, you know, things change over time, even best practices, new things come along. So at what point do we ask a CNA to come back in and look at what we've done so far, and even think about, oh, well, gee, when we did the audit 3-4 years ago, people weren't thinking about this, and now some new best practices have come along, or gee, y'all are in compliance on this, but the annual review isn't quite where it ought to be going. Do we have any thoughts for kind of a overall review after we've had some time for the data to be usable and transparent?
We do. I'll speak to that briefly. We have some things in the budget and some things that we've talked about terms of an outside audit entity. We have partnerships in place. Among those that we're working through is the Center of Police and Equity, and some other experts around the country and at the university level that are working with us. We have contracts that are funded and are in place that are being repeated again next year, where they look at things like use of force, like our reporting process for complaints and internal affairs accountability, things like body cameras, traffic stops. Mayor, I don't think we ever will be done. I think you said sometimes things change. Things always change.
That's
And
right.
in policing, it's important that we get it right, that we look at evidence-based practices, that we look at what the research is, that we have partnerships with places like the Police Executive Research Forum, the ICP, major city chiefs, other entities, and that we are constantly investing in our people in a conversation that is sprinkled with outside influences, that is much more objective, and in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it, making sure that we're doing it right. And ultimately, it's the outcomes that matter. And we're not equipped, I think, to do our own audit of our own audit as a big picture ongoing. I think that is something that is built into this, that we have other entities that are going to be looking at this. I'm excited about filling this procedural justice position. I'm excited about some of these other partnerships. And I think that will speak to your question. I know that that's something that you've had concern about from day one. We've heard from others from Cajun with that concern to make sure that, hey, if you're making all this progress, frankly, I've had people say you need to get credit for it. But if you talk about it, it really doesn't mean as much as somebody else who has a little bit more objectivity, a little bit more authority, a little bit more outside influence. And I don't think it's going to be a real heavy lift to do that.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for those comments. Madam Clerk, next on our agenda is a public input.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I can agree with the mayor. I think what the chief just said, if that type information can come out too with the outside people that you're using, and they can come up with a report also, I think that can clarify a lot of things too, stating that what have been done, what we're going through, what you're doing. And I think that would clarify a lot that you're not doing internally, that outside individuals are looking at it also. And this might kind of clear up some things also. I believe that might help a little bit too, to get some of these other things off our back, or off your back, so to speak. That, you know, that some of those things that you know, doing that you with the outside people that you have. You see, maybe that might help too, so we can clear up some of these misinformation that's going out.
You know, Councilmember Mitchell, my read on all of this, and I think I'm not sure which one of our presenters said this, but this is always going to be a work in progress. This is not a finalized project. I mean, there's certain things that you can check off as being quote unquote fully in compliance, but I think the point that you're making and the mayor has made and others have said is that this is going to be an ongoing project. This may be a pun on words, but you're going to do some of your own self-policing to some extent. But the point that you're making, yes, it helps to have a third party come in and say, you know, this is where you are, this is what you've done, this is where you need to be, but you're making the progress towards that. And it's always good. Audits are always good. Audits, we do audits in different fashions at in different times. And we have our own audit that we get annually. So doing that is probably a very good idea and I think the department is willing and open to that kind of concept to do that. Mr. Mayor, you had your hand back up, I think.
Well, I was back to the dashboard, and I know it's designed to make it easier for everyone, but not everybody goes online and has dashboards, and just wondered if we had a pretty easy to produce report of the 21 that are in full compliance, the 26 that are in full compliance with review, and the things that we're working on, just to have it available in other formats that we can easily digest and share with others in addition to the dashboard. If y'all could do that, that'd be great.
We are within the first quarter, by the end of the first quarter of this year coming up, we will have a full annual report, which will do that.
That'd be great.
And in the interest of time, we can't talk about all the things that we're doing, but I hit on a few earlier. I mean, we've gone to permanent shifts with our officers, which is a huge change when you do that. But we have the same officers, same beats, working the same times, whereas that used to rotate constantly all the time. The majority, almost all of the officers who wanted the shifts that they were seeking got those shifts that was more friendly to their families. I mean, the off-duty employment issue that we've struggled with, huge change and a progress has been made in implementing a solution with that, and working with HR and working with the CFO and working with our legal team and working with others outside the city. There's amazing, very substantial things that will be listed in that report.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks. Okay. Madam Clerk, I noticed we have a opportunity for public input. Do we have a number of folks who have signed up?
Yes, sir. We have 3 speakers who have signed up.
Okay. And why don't we give them each 2 minutes? Are you gonna control that part of it, Madam Clerk, as they call it in, I presume?
Yes, sir. Our first speaker is Suzanne Hardy. And if you could press *6 to unmute yourself.
There's a 2-minute time limit, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Suzanne Hardy. You could press *6. All right, we will move on to the next speaker, Jerome Harris. If you're on the line, if you could press *6. Jerome Harris. All right, we will move on to the next speaker, Mavis Hugie. If you're on the line, if you could press *6.
Hello, this is Mavis Hugie. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay, and I've gotten a text from Suzanne that she was unable to, she is on the call. She was unable to unmute. So if you could maybe go back to her when I'm done. And you could do the same with
Good afternoon.
with Harris. Can
you hear me?
I'm happy.
Yeah, hold on, please, sir.
We
We moved on to the next speaker. We'll come back to you in a second, okay?
Good afternoon.
Hold on, wait a
thank
minute.
you.
Wait a second, please, sir. We're trying to have some order here. We're on this.
Miss Hugie is trying to speak. If you could proceed.
Yeah, Ms. Hugie.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you. 2 years after the completion of the racial bias audit, there's been no public release of the report on progress despite the passing of several deadlines that were established by the Charleston Police Department to release such a report. Without a report on progress, we are left with CPD's raw data, some of which was shown to us today, to tell us what's occurring. And the data is grim, as will be further described by another speaker. It needs to be emphasized that at no time has CAJM ever called upon CPD to stop policing in any neighborhood or to quote unquote fix numbers. To imply otherwise is disingenuous at best. CAJM knows and understands and would expect CPD to understand that Black people making up 100% of the persons stopped for loitering in Charleston when they only make up 21% of the population, and other disparities of this nature have nothing to do with making Charleston safer for anyone. They are evidence that Black people are experiencing bias in policing. The ability to review the data via the dashboard and other outlets is a welcome result of the audit, but in the absence of analysis to contextualize the data, it is still impossible for the average citizen to understand what is going on and to measure progress against the goal of reducing and eventually eliminating racial disparities in policing. To this end, the community was also promised well over a year ago that CPD would engage an independent third party to provide a review of CPD's audit implementation, and this has yet to occur. The Public Safety Committee has the most direct oversight of the audit and its implementation. Today, we call on the Public Safety Committee to require CPD to complete the promised outside review of the audit implementation with a focus on the genesis of continued disparities and recommendations to reduce and eventually eliminate such disparities, and to make audit updates a standing agenda item on the Public Safety Committee's agenda to assist in necessary oversight and to allow regular public communications on progress. The city did well to invest in a racial bias audit of its police department.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
All right, next we'll go back to our other two speakers. Suzanne Hardy, if you're on the line, if you could press *6.
Ms. Hardy? Ms. Hardy?
All right, we will move on to Jerome Harris. If you're on the line, if you could press *6.
Mr. Harris? You were just on a second ago.
You have to press *6 to unmute.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, Mayor. Chief, it's good to see you. Hope you're doing well. My comments are, basically, as I've probably spent as much time, or quite a bit of time reviewing the documents, the reports, and monitoring what the department has been doing. I commend the staff on what they've done in terms of collecting of data and attempting to have the systems talk to each other. Concern that continues to resonate with me is that there does not appear to be a concerted effort or priority placed on assessing the impact of changes that have been made in the department on the racial disparities. It is completely possible, in my opinion, for the department not to make changes and not have racial disparities change. But I think it is important to give priority to assessing that. The chief and staff have talked a lot about problem-based policing. And I think that persistence of racial disparities and the perception of that is important. To the dashboard does not include information or perception of the community on the impact of those changes and outcomes, and I think that's important. I urge also the Public Safety Committee to, at its earliest point, take up the recommendations of the Criminal Justice Committee, of the Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation Commission, which spoke to both ordinances that are in existence that might have an impact in this area and the performance and the operation of the municipal court. Thank you for the time and urge you to continue. I'm encouraged to hear that the department will be making at least twice a year reports to this committee as it relates to these actions.
Thank you, sir.
And Suzanne Hardy,
Ms. Hardy?
if you're on, if you could press *6 to unmute yourself.
Ms. Hardy?
Those were all the speakers that we had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we will, I think we're doing pretty good on time, Madam Clerk. We have one more item to take up, a report from the Homeland Security. And if I could ask the members of the CPD to hang on, just in case we do have time, Ms. Hardy does get back on to hear from her. So if you don't mind, we'll move on to item number 6, which is our report from U.S. Homeland Security. Scott?
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Crabb. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge with U.S. Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, here in Charleston. First, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak to you all a little bit about HSI and what we're doing in the local area, and specifically what we're doing with regards to human trafficking investigations, and that being done collectively with the City of Charleston Police Department. I'll share a screen here for a quick presentation. For those who aren't extremely familiar with what HSI is or does. We're the principal investigative arm of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and we're responsible for investigating transnational crime and threats, and specifically those organizations that exploit the global infrastructure through which trade, travel, and finance move. It's a very wide investigative remit. We enforce some 400 plus federal violations in the U.S. Judicial system. Our primary operational priorities for this year are four kind of key parts. The big ones being investigations of crimes of exploitation and victimization. And this is where our human trafficking, child exploitation, and forced labor investigations fall. Also forced labor.
You still with us?
I think, Mr. Crab, if you're on the line, I think you froze up.
Agent Crab? You froze up on us a little bit, so we lost you. Hello?
Steve, did you want to speak to this item at all while he's trying to get reconnected?
I'm not familiar with his entire presentation.
Okay. I see him back on, Jennifer. He's still muted, looks like, and no video. Agent Crab, are you still with us?
It's computer like mine, I guess.
Do we have a number for him, Madam Clerk? We can call and see what his situation may be.
Yeah, I just called him and I'm texting him now.
Okay. We're good on time, so we can wait a few more seconds. Agent Crab?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we ask Agent Crab to come back to our next meeting. Maybe we could have try for a better connection.
I think that's probably true. Did Ms. Hardy ever get back on? Ms. Hardy, you with us?
Star 6. Ms. Hardy, if you'd like to speak at this time, we'll try you again.
She's dialing back in. Forgive me for interrupting.
I'm sorry?
I just said, forgive me for interrupting. She was going to dial back in because for some reason she couldn't, star 6 wasn't working for her.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we do. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, gosh, I have called back in several times. Okay, thank you. At the heart of our call for the audit was to build trust in a safer community with CPD. Black persons had shared hundreds of stories of unfair treatment, and CPD's data confirmed that Black people represented the vast majority of all arrests and use of force incidents, despite being only 21% of our population. So our overall goal for the audit was and is to significantly reduce racial disparities. But 2 years in, CPD's data shows no reduction in disparities for any category of crimes or use of force. And we don't see mention in any of CPD's public documents of their intent or plan to reduce disparities or even to acknowledge it as the goal. We've asked for the plan a number of times but gotten no response. Now, we acknowledge that progress has been made on policy clarity, data capture, and the long-awaited dashboard. Lieutenants Bruder and Cortella are doing really fine work. However, we can't be misled that we're improving law enforcement experience for Black people by making our cities safer because CPD is checking off the individual recommendations of the audit. These items are a means to the end. They are not the end goal of the audit itself. An interim report to connect in plain English the progress on each audit recommendation with actually reducing disparities was first promised in late 2019 and then several dates in 2020 and 21. And now we're hearing it's the second quarter for 2022, over 2.5 years past the completion of the audit. This is not trust-building behavior. So we're calling on accountability and leadership from public safety to publicly affirm the goal of the audit to substantially reduce disparities and to set measures of success for the next 3 years, to hold accountable CPD to deliver these goals, to work with the community to deliver serious action plans to reduce disparities, including finding the right third party, as we've talked, contracting with the Center for Policing Equity to understand why there are disparities and what specific actions CPD must take to drive those down, and to also make public participation in these meetings accessible on a regular practice. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, ma'am. All right, I think we've heard from all three of those who wanted to speak in our public comment part. Chief, any word back from Agent Crabb? Did he ever respond?
No, I think that's probably prudent what the mayor recommended. I will say there's been a lot of interest in human trafficking by the mayor, by the council, by our communities, by the AG, by, there is a substantial problem. And you'll hear more about that. I look forward to this presentation from Scott. He's a sharp guy. He reached out to us maybe, I don't know, at least a year and a half ago. We've built a relationship. We have a task force officer assigned to their team. We have made some cases, and I think there's a lot more that needs to be done. I think we're barely scratching the surface. So we have an MOU that's been developed with HSI. We have this relationship that's been built with Scott and his team. And we have, I think, a balanced approach where there's more education, there's more partnerships, there's more awareness. And sadly, we're going to have a lot more cases. But that's what we need to do. We need to go about that important work. And you'll hear more about that from Scott and some of our team when we meet again at the next meeting, whenever that's scheduled.
Madam Clerk, I think we'll just go ahead and finish our committee meeting, and we'll reach out to Agent Crabb and get him back on maybe for the last meeting of this year, if not for the first part of January. I think we want to get a full report from him. Thank you all for participating. Chief Reynolds, any parting comments on the three speakers' comments that they had to offer?
No, I appreciate their and respect their influence. Jerry in particular, as he said, everything he said was correct. He's been very involved from day one with everything we're doing. He's advocated for resources. They've done a lot to try to help us in this process. I will say, I believe that we've been very responsive, maybe not with the actual written report and the delivery of a report, which you will see in the next few months. But I will tell you, we have had many, many conversations with Suzanne and with Cajun. I don't think there's a single phone call that has been made that's been unresponded to. Captain Crutella in particular, Captain Bruder and others. We have work to do. We have to have thick skin. We have to be willing to agree to disagree. We have to embrace the idea that we need to do better in our African-American communities across America, in this region, in this city, in our profession in general. We embrace that challenge. We know that our success relies on our ability to do that successfully. So we have work to do to build trust, to build engagement, to build collaborative efforts, to build efforts that are successful, and reducing disparities will be amazing. We've got a good start, and we have a lot more work to do. And I'm not afraid of the conversation. I embrace it. As you heard in the beginning, that's probably a good place for us to end. We know that we need to have these relationships. We know that we need to listen and work together. We cannot do this without each other. It has to be collaborative. It has to be in a partnership. It has to be together.
Chief, thank you. And I just want to make a comment as we close this out, and sort of along the lines of what Councilmember Shealy has recognized and has been experiencing. I've been practicing law for over 40 years. And my my practice has been mainly in the criminal justice forum, and I was a federal prosecutor for a number of years. And even before I got on council, my experience working with CPD has been always very positive. I mean, not that I've always agreed with some of the things that they have done or said, or maybe even how they've prosecuted some of my clients in the past. And while I don't take any, and I can, and I will never take any cases from investigated by Charleston Police Department, Baltimore City Council, my experience with them as an organization, as an institution, has been one of the highest levels of professionalism throughout the Tri-County area. I've had other experiences with other agencies, law enforcement agencies, that I can't say that about. And I can just tell you that they're continuing to want to be open to this process. Is very important to our community, to all of our citizens. And y'all have done that. Your leadership team has demonstrated to me over the years your willingness to listen, to have big ears, and to embrace some of the changes that need to be made. But from the starting point, it's just, I've always been very proud. I think that the caliber of the men and women who work in that department are the highest caliber, the highest level of professionalism. And I know, Chief, that you're going to continue that with your leadership team. And I just want to make sure that they hear that from me. If I've said that publicly and privately, and I want this committee to hear that from me as well. We do have work that needs to be done. We all recognize that. And as I said earlier, this is a work in progress. But you've got our support. We will get updates from you on a biannual basis. So when 2022 comes around, we'll look for 2 reports coming in, and we'll look into this other idea that Councilwoman Mitchell has been proposing with an outside audit to give us sort of take our temperature, I guess, to see where we are and what's going on with that. So all of y'all, thank you so much. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I knew you would have to jump in it after I made those comments, but go right ahead.
Well, there was a lot said. I did want to pick up with a comment of Mr. Harris's, and I want to thank him for his service, because he served on our Police Citizens Advisory Committee and also on our Commission on Equity and Racial Conciliation. And I know he followed the racial bias audit, and it's worked very closely as well. So it seems like we've had, a few different looks at the apple. And I would just ask us as a group to bring forward any recommendations that came from those other efforts that kind of logically go with the 72 recommendations of the racial bias audit, and rather than wait till the next audit of the audit, if there's something good that came out of those commission recommendations that apply here, let's go ahead and make it 75 that we're implementing rather than 72. And maybe y'all have already done the nitpicking on which ones we're kind of already working on and which ones are different. But I would welcome us just to, as part of that process of always improving and always looking at other ideas that come along, ask that we review those things as well.
Thank you, Mayor. All right. There's no crime in finishing ahead of schedule, and so I appreciate everybody's participation on that and comments. Mayor, thank you for those closing comments as well, and we'll take that to heart then. There being no further business, this meeting of the Public Safety Committee is hereby adjourned, and I'll see a good portion of you folks at the next 2 committee meetings I have. Stay well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.